Have you ever wondered why your phone might be designed in California, assembled in China, with parts from South Korea, and then shipped and sold back to you? Or why a politician might suddenly decide to slap a huge tariff on imported steel, even if it makes cars more expensive for consumers, meaning their voters? These aren't just random economic decisions. Instead, they're driven by deep-seated competing philosophies about how nations should interact with the world. Mercantilism and Globalism. For centuries, these two competing philosophies have guided how nations interact with each other on an economic level. They've been behind policies that made secure international commerce possible, while leading to wars, hot and cold, made it possible for consumers to buy cheap products while gutting local industries and businesses, and other wide-ranging effects, good and bad. We can easily see these two policies coming into conflict with each other again right now. But what might they really mean for us in the 21st century, and which is going to shape our future? Let's start with the older kid on the block, mercantilism. Imagine a world where every country sees itself in a fierce competition with every other country. The goal? To acquire and hoard as much wealth as possible, because wealth equals power. That, in a nutshell, is the core idea of classical mercantilism, which dominated Europe from the 16th to the 19th century. Back then, wealth was often measured in gold and silver. How did you get more? By selling more stuff to other countries, aka exports, than you bought from them, aka imports. Their goal was to achieve a trade surplus, and to achieve this, mercantilist nations had a few key strategies. The first strategy was protectionism. They put up high tariffs, the taxes on imported goods, and quotas, limits on how much can be imported, to make foreign products more expensive and less appealing to consumers, thus encouraging people to buy domestically produced goods. Another strategy was subsidies, where governments would actively support their own industries, giving them money or tax breaks to help them produce more and sell it abroad. European nations of that era built colonial empires as a source of cheap raw materials and as guaranteed markets for their manufactured goods. This was a pretty sweet deal for the colonizers. If you've watched the movie Gandhi, you know this wasn't a good deal at all for those who lived in the colonies. Tying into this was building national power, where the ultimate goal wasn't just economic prosperity, it was also about building national strength by funding armies and navies and dominating economic and political rivals. As I've discussed in a few recent videos, they viewed it as a zero-sum game, meaning that if one side wins, the other side must lose. Now, you might think, that sounds like a pretty old-fashioned approach, full of bad things. And yes, in its 18th and 19th century form, quite true. But today there are new forms of mercantilism which are very much alive and kicking. We see it when countries use trade policy as a tool of statecraft. For example, since the 1990s, China has used mercantilist policies such as tariffs and subsidies to build its economic power as well as national prestige. In turn, President Trump has decided to kick off a trade war where massive tariffs and other trade restrictions are being used to push for strategic advantage in both trade and political influence. We also see both China and the U.S. investing in strategic industries like technology, especially artificial intelligence and space exploration, defense, and energy production, since these are vital for national security, a classic mercantilist concern. We've seen other trade imbalances where mercantilist policies are in play, although the U.S. versus China one is perhaps the most visible to us today. I think that you can see that the appeal of this policy direction is understandable, since it promises to protect jobs, build self-sufficiency, and strengthen national pride and resolve. But yes, there are the downsides. It can lead to higher prices for consumers, less choice, and potentially damaging trade wars that hurt everyone. In the worst case, it has been known to lead to shooting wars, ranging from the American Revolution to World War II. Will it lead to another one in the 21st century? That's scary to think about, especially with nukes, biologicals, and AI-driven weaponry. In fact, these fears of further destruction following world wars shifted the policy pendulum to the other side, globalism. Let's talk a bit about it for a couple of minutes. Basically, if mercantilism is about building walls, globalism is about tearing them down. Globalism is built on the idea that the world is becoming increasingly interconnected, economically, culturally, and politically. Its primary economic idea is the theory of comparative advantage. For example, if country A is good at making wine and country B is good at making cloth, when they freely trade, both nations will benefit. This is the idea of free trade by reducing or eliminating tariffs and quotas to allow goods and services to flow easily across borders, along with open financial markets that welcome foreign investment and allow capital to move freely. Beyond this is the goal of international cooperation, where global institutions like the World Trade Organization and regional ones like the European Union set rules and promote collaboration. It's believed that the free flow of capital, information, and people will enhance communication and cultural exchange, leading to a more understanding and peaceful world. Supporters of globalism will quickly point out that it has fueled unprecedented economic growth by giving the average person access to a vast array of goods at lower prices, spurred innovation, and led to greater understanding and cooperation between nations, thus reducing the likelihood of major wars. Sounds peachy, doesn't it? But, I'm going to have to look at globalism's dark side. One big one is job displacement. One notable example is that many manufacturing jobs in wealthier countries have been moved to places with lower labor costs, what Ross Perot called a giant sucking sound way back in the early 1990s. Even traditional white-collar jobs, such as those in technology and finance, are increasingly being offshored to places with lower salaries, less regulation, and fewer employee protections. This is seen as increasing income inequality, creating a significant wealth gap worldwide. While globalism might grow the overall economic pie, it typically hasn't been distributed anywhere close to evenly. This increasing gap between rich and poor can easily repeat the dark history of colonization in poorer countries, while simultaneously creating political unrest in wealthy ones. Beyond this, some see the loss of sovereignty as a huge deal. They feel that international bodies and agreements, especially those where well-connected elites meet in secret to discuss the fate of everyone else, not only undermine national and local decision-making, but put concepts like democratic representative government at risk. Other critics point out the vulnerability of the globalist system, especially after the worldwide pandemic showed how heavily interconnected supply chains can be very fragile. So here we are in 2025. Which force is winning? On one hand, we see a resurgence of mercantilist thinking, most notably by Donald Trump, although several other national leaders have similar views. We've seen a significant increase in national security concerns that are strongly linked to economic policy, such as discussions about Greenland. Then there's the strong desire to bring critical industries home that's being driven by the aftermath of the pandemic, as well as geopolitical rivalries. But on the other hand, we can't simply unscramble the globalist egg. Our economies are deeply entangled, since companies and consumers alike have come to rely on global supply chains. Consumers have grown accustomed to the variety and prices that global trade offers, even though most are aware that this might come at a cost to their own economic well-being. Companies need a global supply chain to keep costs, from raw materials to labor, down, and to have access to lucrative markets. So we've talked about mercantilism and globalism, but there's this third way that's been suggested called Glocalism, a blend of global and local. You've probably heard the phrase, think globally, act locally. But a big question hangs over this idea: is Glocalism just a wolf in sheep's clothing? Is it simply globalization putting on a friendly local face to sell us more stuff without really changing the underlying globalist power dynamics? Let's take a look behind the curtain and see who's on board with this idea of glocalization, who usually initiates it, who will benefit from it. Yes, just as I suspected, it's powerful nations, corporations, international organizations, and other dominant cultural exporters. They have the resources and reach to make changes, while local actors have to react and adapt to the terms set by the global player, and that's only if they're able to do it in time to survive. Others point out that the local autonomy offered is actually quite limited, like choosing from a small number of menu items at a restaurant. It's autonomy in name only, that's only allowed within a system designed and largely controlled centrally, where the local part is curated by the global. Yes, this supposed compromise system being offered up to us is just the same old thing with a thin local veneer over it. Many people see through this facade, so it's no wonder they're attracted to populist politicians who more or less call it for what it is. But I think we can easily see that their zero-sum mindset can be just as damaging, if not more so. The challenge for policymakers as well as for us as citizens is to find a balance. How can we reap the benefits of global interconnectedness while managing its risks and ensuring that the benefits, prosperity, and freedom are shared more equitably? How do we protect national interests without retreating into an armed, isolated fortress? These are the critical questions defining our time, and understanding what's in play and the risks involved is the first step. We need to always ask who benefits from this particular idea and who might be hurt by it. Where does the power really lie in a given scenario? Me? I'm in favor of stronger localization with an emphasis on smaller and more responsive organizations, both political and private. While there are some big issues that may need big organizations to handle them, these should be limited in scope and power. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I always appreciate hearing from you. And as always, help out the channel by liking and subscribing.